I love taking photos of water, and one of the subjects that I like the most for my long exposure photography are waterfalls. And this is exactly what we are going to do today. Let's go. Welcome to my channel. Here we talk about photography and I make videos just like this one where I take you with me on a long exposure photography adventure. So if you're here for the first time and you love photography like I do, it might be a good idea to subscribe. I am in the Italian Alps between France and Italy. It is late spring, it's a weekday, so nobody's here. The forecast is rain, but it doesn't look like it. So most likely I will not meet a lot of people, which I love. I still have about 20 minutes to arrive to my waterfall. In the meanwhile, I will show you some of my long exposure waterfall photography so that you will get an idea of why I like waterfalls so much. In the last months, between my photography break and my foot injury, I really didn't spend a lot of time in nature. And I have to say that just a small hike like this one on my own, it's fantastic. I really think that connecting with nature is like connecting with yourself. And I have to say that I am enjoying this part tremendously. What I'm not enjoying at all, instead, is the level of my shape form. I haven't been working out. I'm in a very bad shape, and it shows. 15 steps uphill and I'm out of breath. That's not good. We need to fix this. On the positive side, the good thing is that I feel that here I shouldn't worry too much about bears, as I think that this area, maybe I shouldn't say, but this area shouldn't have a very big bear population compared to California. At least that's what I like to think. And clearly this is my spot. Let me set up my tripod and I will explain to you what I'm going to do today, what is my intention, what is the purpose of this long exposure photography session. So one of the first things I like to do, of course, is to check different spots, different compositions, different focal length. I only carried my 20mm lens and my 50mm lens. I believe this is more of a vertical composition, and I will start with my 50mm. What I want to try as a first composition is to frame my image with the branches of this tree as a foreground, having the water falling at different speeds right behind it. Okay, I'm doing this with my iPhone, but I want to show you my composition. You can see the branches are right in front of the waterfall, and I'm curious to see what kind of effect a different exposure length will give to this image. Let me mention that one of the biggest problems that you will have taking photos of waterfalls, especially long exposure photos, will be the mist that the waterfall creates. So be sure to have plenty of cloths in order to be able to protect and clean your filters before the exposure, otherwise it's going to be a real mess. ISO 64 f8, which will allow me to have in focus both the tree and the waterfall behind, as the tree is about 30 feet, 10 meters from the camera. So I added a polarizer filter, as in a situation like this, not only the polarizer is able to take away reflections from the water, which I really don't need in this case, I believe that the polarizer actually is able to saturate a little more the color of the trees. The green will pop a little more, so why not? I have it. And because of this, at ISO 64 f8, I have a base exposure of 1/8. I will put a 10 stops neutral density filter, which will give me an exposure length of about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Just a reminder, when I set my base exposure, I always use aperture priority. When I'm taking my long exposure, I move to manual mode. We will start with a very long exposure, and we will reduce the exposure length little by little to see how the effect will change in a waterfall situation like this one. And here we have the first composition. As you can see, the water, it gets pretty messy at 2 minutes. So let's dramatically reduce the exposure to 30 seconds. So in order to achieve a 30 seconds exposure, I am not able to use the 6 stops because with 1/8, my exposure length would be about 8 seconds. So I am going to increase the ISO until my base shutter speed is 1/30. In this fashion, I will be able to use the 10 stops and have an exposure length of 30 seconds. With this water pressure at 30 seconds, we don't have a huge difference in terms of effect. So let's drag it down to 15. I'll just show you how to control and adjust your exposure length using the ISO. And now I'm going to show you how to achieve a similar result, the same result, changing the aperture. So right now I want to use my 6 stops and the filter. At ISO 64, my base shutter speed right now is 1/10. I need to achieve a half of a second in order to be able to get a 30 seconds exposure. So I'm going to close my aperture until I have my shutter speed at half of a second. And in this case, I will need to use my smallest aperture for this lens, which is f16. The water is so strong that even at 15 seconds, we don't have major differences. We will need to reduce the exposure even more. f8 ISO 64, 3 seconds exposure with the 6 stops and D. Again, there is so much water, there is so much pressure that we still have a very silky effect on the water with just 3 seconds exposure. Let's try with the shorter exposure length. I'm using the 3 stops and the ISO 64 f11 1 second exposure. And with 1 second, we can see a little more definition in the water. Let's try half of a second. And now the water starts to give us even more definition. Aperture is 7.1, 1/3 of a second. I start to like it. ISO 100, 1/5 of a second. Very cool. What kind of takeaway we can get from this? Basically, the more pressure you have, the less important is to have a very long exposure. Actually, if you want to get a little more details in the water, if you want to see a little more, you could get better results by reducing the shutter length. Let's move on and see if we can find another composition. So I am a little higher up on this hike and I found this beautiful spot. At the same time, as you can see, this scene is very busy, it's very messy. I love it, but it doesn't really match or fit the kind of photography that I like. So I will show you how long exposure photography can help you to clean this kind of scene and create a more serene atmosphere, even in a very noisy and busy place like this. So I frame my image and I'm going to take a shot without any filters. 1/125 f8 ISO 64. And again, you can see that although we are in a beautiful spot, the image is nothing really special. Let's try to make it special by adding some filters. There's a lot of mist here. I'm closer to the water, so clearly I need to pay more attention with my lenses and filters. I'm going all out now. I set up a 15 stops handy filter. I set an exposure length of 15 minutes. I'm basically challenging the mist, the droplets on the filters to try to create a very surreal atmosphere in a place like this. I really missed being in nature and taking photos. And I guess for this reason, I enjoyed making this video tremendously. It was really fun, it was a great practice. And I hope that this was useful for you as well. Maybe you were able to catch a few tips here and there. Maybe you just got inspired to get out and try long exposure photography or landscape photography for yourself. But anyhow, enjoy nature, respect nature. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.